A warm welcome to everyone who's attending today. My name is Brad McDougall, and I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for OnCue Regina. Thanks to a federal grant from the Canadian Performing Arts Workers Recovery Fund, administered by Canadian Heritage, OnCue's incubator program in 2022-23 will include 3 professional development opportunities intended to serve a range of performing artists working in different disciplines at different stages in their careers, and both within the city of Regina and provincially. As part of the incubator program, this is the 4th in a series of online professional development workshops. OnCue Performance Hub is a new non-profit performing arts organization with a new organizational model and approach, offering a collaborative producing model serving local artists and diverse audiences in Regina and beyond. Our aim is to enliven Regina's downtown core and activate connection between performing artists, businesses, and audiences. We bring together artists across dance, music, theater, and spoken word. Our goal is better retention of creatives within our community through a supportive environment that facilitates innovation and realization of creative ideas, while providing practical, professional development of the business and administrative skills creative entrepreneurs need to survive and thrive as independent artists. We are grateful to be working on Treaty 4 land, the territory of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Michif Nation. We also acknowledge the peoples of Treaties 2, 6, 8, and 10. We recognize the past and ongoing harms experienced by these people and embrace a mandate to work with them in fostering greater understanding and a better way forward. Along with us today are our interpreters, Barb Froese and Brandy Radcliffe. Also with us today is Jessie Grant, owner of Rebel Marketing, to talk about the marketing for artists and to answer your questions. Jess is the owner of Rebel Marketing and Media, a boutique marketing strategy company located in Regina, Saskatchewan. After obtaining a BA in English and a BFA in theater, acting, and a certificate in public relations, Jess started her career in corporate marketing. After having worked for some of the largest national brands that are headquartered in Regina, she decided to take her experience and use it to help small businesses, independent artists, and nonprofit organizations. From launching national branding campaigns to creating buzz through grassroots marketing on a shoestring budget, Jess has worked in all levels of marketing. From building a website to engaging with journalists, Jess has provided strategic guidance and training to ensure that your brands make an impression. So just a few house guidelines. We've left some time at the end of the presentation for question and answer. So if you would like to put them in the chat, and then we'll review them and go through them towards the end of the presentation. So for now, please just mute yourselves and I will turn it over to Jessie.
Hello, my name is Jess Grant. Brad, I see a couple more people in the waiting room. Would you like me to let them in?
Letting them in.
Awesome. So I am here today to talk about branding, marketing, and publicity for artists. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys should be able to see my slides. Been doing a lot of Zooming lately, so okay, so today we're just going to start off with a quick introduction, and then we'll get into kind of the nitty-gritty of it all. We're talking about branding, marketing, and publicity, and a little bit of advertising, and I'll explain the differences here in a moment. I just want to acknowledge that it's through OnCue that I'm here, and I'm very happy to work with them. And I've got some information regarding me there, just so that you guys can hunt me down later if you need to. That'll be at the end as well. So as As you said, my name is Jessie Grant. I have a theater degree. I have an English degree, and I have a public relations certificate. I spent my whole career in marketing. I got in right after school with a specifically digital focus, and I kind of never got back out. And overall, I got frustrated with the fact that many small businesses and many nonprofit organizations were unable to utilize marketing services because they came in large packages that would be, upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that was just unrealistic for a lot of people. So I created Rebel Marketing and Media as a way to be able to serve those businesses. Rebel Marketing and Media is my company. It was started in 2018 as a way to provide affordable boutique services to nonprofit organizations, small businesses, as well as, I've done everything from independent artists to specific campaigns, that kind of thing. Every service I provide is a la carte, meaning that if you only need SEO optimization, I can do that. If you need a new website, I can do that. If you just want some strategy work done, I can do that. And you don't have to buy a whole bunch, or any business doesn't. I work with OnQ, and I'm proud to be a senior partner for Riser Regina through OnQ. So today we're going to talk about some definitions in marketing that I think a lot of people find confusing. We're going to talk about the power of your personal brand as an artist. We're going to talk about how to build a personal brand. We're going to talk about the tools of the trade. We're going to talk about identifying your target audience, and some organic marketing, paid marketing, kind of the difference, and then some sort of general tips and tricks that I think it's important for everybody to know. Just going to change you here. There we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is definitions. So what is branding versus marketing versus advertising versus publicity? What does it all mean? What are the differences? And how can you apply them? So branding is the overall visual representation or tone and reputation of yourself, your business, your production, your product, etc. As you can see, some very key brands there that I'm sure you can recognize. I believe that the time one of the CEOs of Coca-Cola said he wanted a bottle so iconic that it even smashed on the street, you could recognize what it was. And that's what branding is. You need to have a level of reputation and recognition. And these are two very high level brands. Immediately, without a single word, you know exactly what those two brands are. Marketing is the actual promotion of your brand, your product, your production, your tour, whatever you're doing, in the form of a long form campaign. Marketing can be paid or unpaid. Here's an example. This is a marketing campaign that Coca-Cola did. Remember when everybody's names were on those bottles and you'd go and you'd look and you'd see if you'd find your name, and it was a whole ongoing marketing campaign or ploy in a way. That was one of Coca-Cola's more memorable in recent days full-on campaign. Another one for Nike, because I'm going to go with those two brands, is this Colin Kaepernick campaign. So very powerful. It's not selling anything in particular per se. It's marketing the brand, but overall that resulted in positive brand recognition, et cetera, et cetera. Then we get into advertising. So the ad is a single aspect of a marketing campaign, and that it can be placed into digital advertising spaces. So ads can be digital, social media, print, radio, TV. It's often referred to as paid media. Ads almost always include a call to action. Some of them are a little bit more obvious than others. Here's an example. So Coca-Cola has an ad. This was likely reformatted into multiple different ways, but this one in particular was a print ad. And it says, very clear call to action, open a Coke, open happiness. Very clear call to action. This is one single ad in what would have been likely an open happiness larger campaign. I don't know if anybody remembers this ad of this kid who starts running and it says "Find your greatness." That's a little bit more subverted of a call to action, but it is positioning. So it's one ad. This one was a commercial. It's one ad supporting a "Find Your Greatness" campaign that then actually carried on into all the way up to the Colin Kaepernick campaign. And it puts its logo right there. Find your greatness. It's suggesting Nike's the way to do that or support you in doing that. Publicity is a whole different beast. Publicity is the public visibility, social proof, and or awareness of your product or brand outside of marketing. This is typically what they call earned media. This is news articles, reviews, testimonials, showing up on CTV, feature editorials, that kind of thing, that isn't necessarily something you could pay for, but it's not something you could do on your own. So what is personal branding? And that's really what I believe is the core of what will benefit artists the most. Personal branding, and why is it important for you specifically, is because you are one artist who is often tied likely with multiple different productions, multiple different companies, whether it's theater companies, maybe it's musical tours, maybe it's dance troupes, whatever it is, you're tied to multiple things. And you're then a part of the marketing machine for that thing. You've likely been in productions or when you've wanted to promote your band and you've been asked to post on social media, you've been asked to, have your friends and family come out, spread the word. This is why a personal brand would make that more powerful. Building your personal brand builds a foundation of which your reputation resides. So a personal brand is essentially your reputation. And it exists both online and offline. It exists in person with every person you meet. And you are now going to be conscious about how you build that brand instead of it just being. It's sort of a public relation. It's new. Personal branding is a title. Public relations would have been like, getting the angle on your networking and your personality. So we want to be very authentic while still maximizing the potential to be relatable, to build maybe not a following if that's not your desire, but to build some investment in the people that do view your content and meet you in person in joining on whatever journey you happen to be on, whether that's a new production every 6 months or whether it's going on tour, whether it's a gallery viewing at an art show, all those things, very important. So how do you build a personal brand? I've listed out what we're going to kind of go through. So firstly, you set goals, then you do an audit, then you decide what your brand will be, then you formalize a framework, then you create a content plan, then you platform yourself, then you engage, and then you got to walk the walk. Okay, but actually how? I've seen a lot of trainings in the past that kind of gives you a rough overview of how to do it and no real technical details. So I'm going to go into exactly what you need to think about and do when you're creating your personal brand. And I'm going to give a little bit of time. So if you've got a pen and paper or you want to think about it and come back, those are all okay, but we're going to ask you questions. Well, I'm going to ask you questions that I want you to write down the answers to and think about. And if you have to come back later to what you've written down or this recording, you're welcome to do so. Step 1, set goals. So you're going to write down and you're going to answer the following. What do I want to achieve by building a personal brand? It might be you want to be an internet star and get sponsorships. That's fine. It might be that you want to sell out every show that you're a part of. That's fine. It could be that you just want to be able to reach people you really care about or that is your target audience to support a project or a vision or a goal you have, whether that's a charity or whether it's selling keychains on the internet. All of those things are 100% valid reasons to build a personal brand. So take a moment, write that down, consider what you would like your goals to be, and you blue sky it a little bit. Pretend like you could overnight have 1 million followers, or pretend that you could overnight meet 100 people that are exactly who you want to meet. How would you use that influence? Okay, that was the easy part though. And now we're going to get into a little bit more difficult part. I want you to write down and answer the following. What is my current public presence? Are you currently on social media? Do you have a website? Do you network regularly? Or have you kind of had the same network for a while? Is that network large? Is it small? Is it effective for you thus far? Then the next question, and this one's sometimes hard, is what do people say about me? And I think you need to look at the good and the bad of this part. And if you have to ask a friend, if you have to ask a mentor, if you have to ask a family member, how do I come across? What do people think of me? That's fine. Probably don't do it right now, but later come back and have some honest feedback come back. From there you go, am I happy with this? Is this what I want to continue to portray? Is this what I want people to continue to think of me? Those things might be true, but that doesn't necessarily they need to be the focus or the highlight of your personal brand. Personal branding is kind of like putting on makeup. You're not necessarily trying to look like somebody else. You just want to highlight the things you like and maybe minimize the things you don't. And that's okay. Still be very authentic, still feel true to yourself, but make sure that what you're doing is highlighting the things that support your goals. Everybody does it online. You can do it to some extent in person, but just make sure it feels like truly you, but the best parts of you. Next, we're going to decide what your brand will be. So you've talked about what you want to do. You've thought about what you're currently doing, if it's working for you. And here we're going to talk about what do you want your brand to be? What do you want people to say about you? What parts of yourself are you most proud of or think are most interesting? What personal brands do you admire? How do their personal brands support their goals? What do you find interesting about those people? Is it that they're really funny? Is it that they're really warm? Is it that they post really interesting content or really visually pleasing content? What do you enjoy and how do you think you can carry that into a personal brand? Now, does this new personal brand, once you've gone through all of that and you've kind of written it out, and you can write it out in sort of a journaling way where you say, okay, here's what people think of me. Here's my brand. Here's who I am in this space. And then ask yourself, does that still feel like you? Does it still feel authentic? Does it highlight what you want to highlight? Does it make you feel confident moving forward that you are that person and that person is the person that achieves the goals you're looking for? If so, great, awesome. If not, feel free to go back, rework it a little bit, and really choose what part you want to focus on. You don't have to tell everybody about, your kid being a brat. You don't have to highlight that part. Maybe you yelled at them as a parent. It happens to everybody. You don't have to necessarily highlight that part, but maybe you're really good at knitting and you think that's really interesting and you want to highlight that part. You're in control of your personal brand. It's not about pretending to be somebody else. It's about allowing people to see the parts of you you want them to see and keeping private the parts of you that you don't. There are no parts of you that are bad, but there are parts of you that you might not want on the internet, or you might not want to tell people when you first meet them, and that's totally fine. The next thing is to formalize the framework. So in this stage, you're going to write down the following. This is what most people think of when they think of branding. They'll think, what logo am I going to have? Well, you don't really need one for a personal brand, but if you're going to apply personal branding to say company branding, you can do that. But more so, how are your pictures going to look? How are you going to look when you go out? Maybe you have a signature red lipstick you wear. Maybe you're Johnny Cash and you wear all black. Whatever you think, and you don't need to do something very limiting, but whatever you kind of want to portray, both in person and online, and in other varieties that you might happen to be on, if there's TV or radio. What do you want to look like? That kind of thing. Another question is what kind of font do you want to use? Do you have a signature color that you sign everything in red Sharpie? Do you like calligraphy fonts? That kind of thing. This will somewhat tie into target audience discussion that we're going to have a little bit later, but it's something to consider now because you have to like what you do to want to do it. Some people have preset filters on Instagram. Some people are known for really lengthy, thoughtful posts on Facebook. Some people are known for just having the biggest smile every time you meet them. What are you going to be known for? The next question is, what is my brand voice? How do I want to sound? What rules will I put in place to be consistent about that? Do you always have a happy-go-lucky tone? Are you a little sarcastic? Do you want to sound friendly? Do you want to sound very formal? That will come from how you speak to people when you meet them, the captions you write, your advertising materials, anything else, right down to your resume. All can be done within the framework of that tone decision. Now, I don't have great examples here per se, but you know that the tone of, say, a medical clinic is going to be a little different than the tone of Sephora. Rebel Marketing's tone is on the sarcastic formal spectrum because I'm pretty sarcastic, but it's a professional company and I work with a lot of high professionals, so it like walks the line. Questions you can ask yourself are, am I going to use contractions when I do my writing? Am I going to swear in my online content? You can choose. I do, but not everybody can, and your target audience might not like that, and we'll identify them later. Then the next question is, what is my elevator pitch? And that is, what's your 30-second pitch to people when people ask you to tell you about themselves or tell them, you know what I mean. Where if somebody walked up and said, hi, I'm so-and-so, what do you do? What do you say? And how can you use that to be persuasive or inviting people? Usually that elevator pitch will tell you a lot about your personal brand. And if your elevator pitch sounds boring, it's because your personal brand probably is a little bit boring. So if you want to zhuzh it up a little or spice it up a little, you can go back a step or two, look at kind of what your tone is. You can look at what your branding is and see if maybe there's something in there that could be a little bit more of a hook. That will come out in your elevator pitch. Other than that, be honest. Talk about the things you're proud of as if somebody was going to hire you on the spot. The next phase gets into content planning. And content planning is a beast of a thing to do. Everybody believes it's easy. It's like acting. Everybody who doesn't act believes they could if they just tried. And in reality, that's not always true. Content creation is labor intensive. It's going to be the most ongoing part of building and maintaining a personal brand that's effective. Now, if your personal brand is totally in person, a little less of a problem, other than you have to be consistently going out in person and meeting people. Online, however, it's a continual process of creating. And what you're creating will be representative of your personal brand. So how do you figure it out? Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I don't live that interesting of a life. I am at home with my cat and my dog most of the time. It's been COVID. I'm in my pajamas. I act sometimes, or I play guitar sometimes, or I paint sometimes, but that's awfully boring to just take a picture of. That's where we get into what a personal brand allows you to do. And it allows you to build interest from your personal interests that can carry on into your professional life. Not everybody wants to open themselves up totally into their personal life. So just keep in mind that you can filter down what you are comfortable to talk about and show, and you can reduce what you're less comfortable showing. If you don't ever want to show your kids, even though you want to show your life, that is totally fine. You're in control. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down 3 to 5 topics that you are an expert in, or you like to speak about, or you'd like to show, that is representative of your personal brand and that you think is interesting and that you like to talk about. And, I would say probably your art is one of them, at least, maybe 2 of them. Maybe you're, talking about your production is one, and talking about rehearsals is another. Your process when it comes to painting is one. Your, selling your paintings is another. The planning that goes into, or the songwriting that goes into music creation and your tour. Those could be 2. And then you can have something else. Maybe it's you really love to cook. Maybe you really love Disneyland and you go all the time, and now you want to talk about how much you love it. Just things you care about that you find interesting. You will find other people who find those things interesting, and then you'll be able to translate that into your overall goal of a personal brand. So then the question is, how do these topics support my goals? Some of them support it because it's really outright promotion. Some of them support it because people love to follow or to support people they feel like they know, or people they feel like they have something in common with. It's been said over and over again that people don't necessarily buy things. They buy experiences or status or comparison. They want to be in comparison with the people who own that or the people who buy that. And that's true right down to tickets to your next gig. So by inspiring the people who might follow you or you might meet in person to want to be invested in what you're doing and be a part of it, is how you can build a sort of grassroots level marketing into selling out your shows, into thinking of you first when somebody's going to put on a production, into, oh man, I have this beautiful painting or a place to put a painting and I need one, or I need a band to play at this event and I'm making my own little festival. Who am I going to think of? You want to build essentially a support system of people you may or may not know well. The question is, what am I an expert in? One of the best things you can do to make people feel like this is a reciprocal relationship, again, in person or online, is to be able to provide them value as much as they're providing you value by buying tickets, by caring about your art, by supporting you in whatever ways possible. So providing expert advice onto anything is always a helpful way to kind of create a give and take, instead of just feeling like you're always asking from the people around you instead of giving anything. Give your knowledge out for free unless you're going to start a business charging for it. And that's one of the best ways to create goodwill too. Next is, when will I set aside time to create content? There's a couple different avenues you can go down. You can create content in the moment. As you're in rehearsals, you take some shots and you say, hey, we're rehearsing for this, or look, I broke my dance shoes. I've done that. Or, oh man, don't you hate it when you forget your guitar picks at home? Whatever it might be, that kind of content. And it does very well. That behind the scenes content is some of the most lucrative content you can work with when it comes to getting investment from people. Or you could batch content if you're looking for, more formalized content, maybe nicer photos, staged photos, you can batch create that, spend an afternoon with a friend in your iPhone or camera or whatever you have, go out, take a bunch of photos and a bunch of different outfits, and now you've got photo content. And then you can sit down, write a bunch of captions, and you have caption content, and you can then schedule it out for the next week, 2 weeks, months, depending on how much you could do in one day. That's an option too. The next point is when and how often will I post content? I'm going to put a big caveat here that if you're thinking of online, a lot of this is based on algorithms and best practices. Those are easy to Google. You can email me if you'd like, but all of that sort of bases on your platform, but it also bases on your own time. How much time do you have to sit there and post to social media? How much time do you have to create content? How much content did you create and how long do you want it to last? What do you have to say? Truthfully, what's not here, the hardest part of content creation is realistically coming up with ideas. And that's why I want you to make sure that you're constantly revisiting those 3 to 5 topics. I call them content buckets sometimes. So say you really like horses and you talk about horseback riding. There's a lot of little subtopics in horseback riding that you could write about. How to pick out your horse's hooves, what kind of saddle you ride in, what breed your horse is, how to groom properly. You can go right down to the nitty gritty and granular of it. And that applies to almost any topic. If you're really interested in painting figurines, I'm sure there's a lot of different steps that you can talk about that would get those people that are interested in that hyped up to read or listen to you. Realistically, I'll be honest with you at this point. Video content is king and short form content is king. I think I touch on that later, but I'll talk about it here. Eventually, Facebook is going to go almost solely to video unless it gets lost in the meta somewhere in between. You've seen it happen with TikTok, which is by far the best algorithm I've ever witnessed. So that's then being stolen by Instagram. Instagram prioritizes Reels now and video content over any other content. And the only one we've left behind is Twitter, but realistically, Twitter's a bit up in the air on what that's going to be like in 6 months, let alone in a year, let alone in 2. So I can't be fully confident in saying that it won't go to video content itself. Video has just become so accessible. It's easier to caption than photos and alt text per se. We're getting to the point now where there's more people viewing video with even the sound off than people are reading captions. And that's kind of just general public. So it's to the point now where you might not feel comfortable with video yet, and that's fine. Start where you are comfortable, but know that if you ever work up to video, it's going to be your most engaged with content, and it's going to be most shown, and it's the quickest way to get your message out to the people who want to hear it. Next is to platform yourself. So this is when you decide which platform you're going to use if you're doing it online, or which tactic you're going to use if you're doing offline. I think the first question to ask yourself is, where do you currently have the most impact? Even if you've just been posting kind of like without a strategy, maybe you have 1,000 Instagram followers, or maybe you have 300 Facebook friends, but you only have 200 Instagram followers. What platform do you enjoy the most? That's the next question. Do you really hate Twitter? I really hate Twitter. So I don't do any of my advertising on Twitter. But if you love it, maybe that's the place to be. What do you find easy to use? And a lot of people don't realize that just using it casually doesn't necessarily mean the same level that you might be using it when you implement a personal brand. And it's definitely not the same level of knowledge that you need to be able to advertise on it formally. We'll get into advertising later on, but it's just important to remember that you need to go where you're comfortable, but understand that you might need to look into it. You might need to do a little research, and that's okay. Doesn't mean you're bad at it. I still do research and take training probably once a month because these things change and they move a lot. But I would say pick a platform, try building there. And if that platform leads into other platforms, then you're free to go and start building those too. Only do as much as you can handle. You can scale slowly, and that's usually the most effective way. Where do you consume content the most is a good question to ask yourself. A lot of people end up, I see it a lot, go to YouTube. They consume a lot of content on YouTube, but they don't want to do YouTube. It's quite labor intensive. So video content likely then is what you're good at or what you like to consume. And so if you're going to do that, but you don't want to do YouTube because it's pretty labor intensive, maybe the place to be is Instagram stories. And how can you translate those things from one to another is a good question to ask yourself. Which tool or platform are you most comfortable with is kind of in the which one do you enjoy the most. And that comes down to not just technical. Do you maybe not want to post on TikTok because you've seen that the posts of your kind of genre get a lot of hate? Don't post there. Instagram's a little bit nicer of a community. Or if you really love the way the algorithm on TikTok works and you want to be there, but maybe you don't like the less visual option of Twitter. So whatever you're most comfortable with, that's what you should use. There's some thought behind having a, in a business sense, we'd call it a lead capture platform and then a engagement platform. A good example of this is your favorite YouTuber probably gets a lot of information or gets a lot of followers from YouTube, but engages with the most on Twitter or Instagram. You can do that. You can be on Facebook and then still have your Instagram show kind of all your behind the scenes content, and that's where you engage more. All of those are options and they can lead into each other. That gets into a little higher level of strategy. So we can revisit that later. If you've got personal questions about that, like what you think you should do, wait till the end and I'll be happy to answer those questions. The next step is to engage. And it's there times 3 because it's that important. Don't, and this is in person and online, don't just put your information out there, say, hi, I'm Jess, and then never ask anything about them. So in-person networking, ask people what they do. People love to answer questions about themselves. In online world, ask your audience a question and maybe they'll engage your content. Engagement is the highest level of success of an online platform. That means that not only do the people who see your content care about your content enough to engage with it, but also they're invested in probably future content. They're invested in your reaction to their reaction to your content. It's all very meta. We're all breaking the fourth wall here. So make sure what you're doing is feeling welcoming and encouraging to the people who are taking time to invest in you. So this is where you need to write down and sort of formalize how you're going to respond to engagement or to feedback. Are you going to answer comments? Are you going to answer your DMs? How are you going to answer? This is where you need to be careful that you don't create a really beautiful personal brand, but not be able to sustain it and not be able to continue it in your real life and not be able to continue it in your comments. You got to be authentic to yourself so that it never feels like you're putting anything on. And usually you can see it with online personalities. You build an online following, you seem so nice, they seem so nice, and then a DM leaks where somebody messaged them something and they're really snippy in the comments. You got to be congruent with your back and forth when it comes to your followers or when it comes to people you meet in person. Make them feel special too. The second you come in with any air of, oh, look at me and my personal brand, you're going to lose people. How do you want to be treated? Treat other people the same way, both online and in person. The next is, how will I encourage people to invest their time, attention, or money into your personal brand or product or promotion or production? How do you go from people being interested in your life to being interested in supporting you? And that's just by building a level of connection. You want people to feel like they are safe spending their money, or that they're excited to go see what you're putting on, or they want to tell their friends about you. So in that sense, you just have to foster real positive feelings or feelings of relatability, or feelings of commitment to them, whether that's through providing information, providing value. You just need to add value to the point that they have some warm fuzzies about you so that they want to support you in the future. And if you think about who you support online or in person, think about why you support them. Whether they're an influencer, or whether they're Call Me Chris on TikTok and her funny skits, or it's a My Favorite Murder podcast and you bought their merch, or whether it's somebody you met and you thought was so cool that you wanted to go see their show. What about it? And can you bring parts of yourself that give that same feeling to other people? And then how will I reach new people that I haven't reached before or I haven't met before? And that might include going out to places you've never been, networking. That might include engaging with content other than your own. So not only do you need to engage in the comments of your post, you need to go follow other people, find other people that suit your target audience and suit your interests, and genuinely from a real place, engage with that content. So you see somebody who's maybe at the Citadel Theater doing a really great show and you were so impressed with their performance. Maybe you go follow them and you message them, or you add a comment and say, oh my gosh, I thought this was so good. You were fantastic in this thing, and build a relationship. It's not that weird on social media anymore. It's a little bit weirder in person if you don't know somebody, but it's easy to build a sense of community by just giving freely your appreciation, and treat people how you want to be treated. Somebody else has a show going on and you've got a bit of a platform, post about them. I'm sure they'd be happy to do the same. And eventually you created a symbiotic relationship with you and the people who support you and the people you support. And the next is to walk the walk. And that means no baloney. You need to be who you say you are. That kind of circles back to the last one. But if you've built a personal brand that is nothing like you and is not authentic, you will not be able to sustain it. So ask yourself, is this person that I want to be really a part of who I am? And is this brand sustainable? Is it authentic? Does it come naturally to me? Has it been effective so far? And that's a good question to ask for reevaluation. Maybe you kind of built your personal brand around being a little bit sarcastic, but you're maybe not landing quite the way you want. Maybe it's time to adjust the level of which you add that into your personal branding. The next question is, are people having the same experience with me in person as they are online? And the last hidden question here is, do I like how I feel about what I'm doing? Again, if it doesn't feel authentic, it's going to feel icky. And if it feels icky, you're not going to continue it. And the secret to personal branding beyond all of this is just that you're consistent. And that's where I struggle. That's where a lot of people struggle, is that they all of a sudden, you've only heard them post when they have a show that they want you to come see. And then they drop off the face of the earth and you have no idea what they're doing in the in-between. And then all of a sudden it's a Facebook post about how, oh, I'm in this show, come and see it. People don't necessarily feel connected to you then. And they definitely can get to the point where they feel a little bit used, a little bit marketed to, a little bit icky. So consistency, you just don't be asking all the time. Be giving some of the time. And some of what you're giving is just insight into your life, into your opinions, into your interests. And that's enough. You don't have to go on Instagram and preach the gospel of horsemanship to people. You can just share your life in a way that's interesting. And that's how a lot of people have become successful online. And it's how a lot of people are successful in person. So now we're going to talk about the ever important identifying your target audience. So your target audience is important to know, because you're kind of just shooting bullets into the air, hoping you hit something if you don't have a target to aim at. And if you're doing that, especially if you get into paid media, you're going to be wasting money, and you're definitely going to be wasting time focusing on people who are never going to buy what you're selling. And that's fine. There's people that will never buy what you're selling, and that's cool. They're just not your people. But if you are spending a lot of time focusing, and maybe money, on those people, you're going to be missing the people who really do want to buy from you. They just don't know it yet. So why is it so important? It prevents you from screaming into the void. That's when you're just saying, hey, come see my show. And everybody who's seen it has never wanted to go to a production in their life. So we're going to try to solve that a little bit. So who is your target person? And this is where you'll hear other marketers call them avatars or personas. But basically just think of yourself. You can give them a name if you want. Think up yourself. Who is your ideal client or Instagram follower or audience member or supporter or donor, whatever it happens to be? Who's the ideal person? It might be a person you already know, and you can kind of base it off of that. It might be somebody you're totally thinking up off the top of your head, but you need to kind of fill out what I would say is like a dating profile almost for them. So what do they enjoy to do? What do they like? Where do they spend their time, both in person or online? Do they really love coffee? Do they often go to coffee shops? Are they the kind of people that would frequent a thrift shop? Are they the kind of people that more like would walk into a outlet mall? What kind of person are they when it comes to their interests? Are you looking for people who are, really into abstract art, or are you looking for people who are really into Excel spreadsheets? Those are different people, probably. Some of them might overlap, but kind of consider what are their interests. That's how you find them, basically. That's the map of how to find these people. The next is how old are they and where do they live? You need kind of the basic demographic information. So age really can tell you a lot. Facebook is a relatively older platform, therefore it's got an older audience. TikTok's a younger platform. It has started with a really young audience, but now it's reached into older audiences that are more tech savvy. Their age can tell you a lot about maybe their financial position. Maybe your target audience is 12-year-olds, but they don't necessarily have money on their own to go see your kids show. So who do you really need to be targeting? Not just those 12-year-olds. Your secondary audience is going to be their parents, right? So that's the kind of work you need to think about when it comes to who your ideal client is. And in the case of kids shows, unless you're working through a school, maybe that's your online or that's your target audience. But often kids focused things are really being marketed towards adults with enough show that the kids get interested in going, but the baseline information is who spends the money. The next is what do they do for work? That might tell you a lot of information about what they might be looking for online. It might tell you a lot of information about their schedules, about when works for them. It might tell you a lot, if you're doing a Tuesday afternoon show, you're probably not going to get people that work in corporate offices. If you're doing, 7 p.m. performances, you're probably not going to get a nurse that works a night shift. It all kind of depends. So that's why it's important to know. And the next are, what are their values? And this is one of the most important things. What do they value? And I don't necessarily mean like they value respect. That's important to know, but it's more important to think, okay, do these people value status? Do they value community? Do these people value a feeling of inclusion? Do they value affordability? Do they value a good purpose and standing behind a good purpose? Those are questions to ask yourself. If you're doing a benefit concert for breast cancer awareness, you're hoping to find a group that values philanthropy, values the support of a cause. And when you work on your target audience, eventually you're going to have multiple target audiences in the end, but that would have some crossover. But finding kind of who is your person and what they do like and say or believe is important on being able to hunt down the people that are going to be affected by your personal brand and your marketing. eventually you get into cross sections of target audiences, and you're going to want to start to eventually flesh out what do those people look like. And I mean literally, especially if you're online. If somebody really values status and that's what you're trying to use in your marketing, you're probably going to go out in a crowd and notice the person who has a Chanel bag. Or if you're, looking for somebody who really values environmentalism, you're going to go out and definitely not look at that person. And you're going to look for the person who's using recyclable shopping bags or advocating for green products, that kind of thing. So those are important to know. And eventually you're going to want to create a level of visual identity for that person. Eventually you're going to go on and you're going to try to maybe grow your online following or grow your network in person. So you're going to want to be able to go to, say, somebody's Instagram profile and say, oh yeah, here, this checks a couple of the boxes of my target person. Maybe I'll give them a follow. Makes it easier. It makes it sort of a checklist of things you look for to find the people who would be interested in you, instead of, here are the things that I hope people like, and you just don't know. Curate your follows and curate the people you meet and the people you learn more about into categories so that you know how to relate to them in the future. The cheat code of your target audience for your personal brand is that it's probably you. More than likely, you've just done all that work and you're like, what, Jess, this whole entire time? Yeah, go back and look. Guarantee you it's probably you, or a version of you, or a version of you that you wish you were. An aspirational, higher self-level version of you. But normally 9 times out of 10, people create content at first themselves, which means their target is likely people like them. So if you wrote a play, you probably wrote it because it interested you. What parts of you led into writing that play? Those are the parts of the people who would be interested in seeing it. It's a circle, but likely it's you. Now, don't get me wrong, here and there, you would have done something like a kid's show that would necessarily not be you as the target audience. And then you got to do a little bit more work fleshing it out. But go and look, a lot of the time, it's probably you. So go find people like you. That makes it easier. So the next is to, how do you use this personal brand? So you built it, you wrote it out, you started posting, you created content with asking nothing in return, you've gained more followers, you've met more people, you've made more friends. Now what? So now you're going to have a campaign, a marketing campaign. And you're thinking to yourself, what do you mean, Jess? It's a personal brand. I would say that your tour, your production, whatever you're in at the time, some art that you're doing, whatever it happens to be, a recital coming up, that is now your marketing campaign. So you're in an upcoming production of The Lion King, we'll say. The lead up to that and the actual performances of that, now that you're in the Lion King marketing segment of your life in your personal brand. It is a campaign, it's long running. So you're going to take the thing you're trying to promote and you're going to ask yourself what you want people to know about this thing. You want them to likely know the dates. You maybe want them to know where to get tickets. You definitely want them to know that it's happening and probably where it's happening. And now you can start to create a campaign around that information. So you'd probably start with that it's happening at all. You're going to create an awareness campaign. And marketers hate the word awareness because it's very untrackable and we love data. But you're going to want to start telling people that you're in it. You're going to want to start maybe posting about being in it. You're going to start talking about what it's like going to rehearsals and how you schedule it all in and the things you're most excited for the show. You're going to lead up with that. Then you're going to get into the more advertising based level probably. So you wrote a production and you're kind of in charge of the advertising of it. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to create the ads based on this campaign. So therefore, you're going to have to create multiple taglines or messages. Taglines is kind of hit and miss. Messages that you around the things you want them to know. And then you're going to determine the best formats and platforms to give that information. 9 times out of 10, people forget dates. So you're going to want to be able to provide that in a way that is visual. So while you might meet somebody on the street and go, you know what, August 24th, I'm doing this really cool dance performance, and I would love for you to come. I'm going to say 2 minutes away, they're going to walk away and probably forget August 24th. But then as long as you're following up and you're posting and you've got other places for them to find that information and it's visual, that would be good. Same with times, dates, times, locations, that kind of like really like nitty gritty info. People like to get that visually. You know, then you have to ask yourself, okay, so I have behind the scenes content, me getting ready for rehearsal, me practicing, me whatever, that of course does not impact the performance in any way. Like, there might be some things you're not allowed to talk about, but you've created some hype that might be best done on Instagram stories. But the actual poster that you're going to repost, probably best on your actual page or on Facebook, or in person. You're going to walk around and you're going to poster. That's great too. So you just got to think about the platforms for what content. And then the next part's you got to create ads. Now, depending of whether or not you are in a production that already has advertising or whether you're doing it for your own musical tour or whatever, Canva is a really great option. That's what I made this on. It's the free version's great. Just create something visual to work with. Your show poster might be it. An invitation might be it, whatever it is. And that's kind of an ad. Now, you might take it further. You might do video content. You might do a radio interview. You might do online audio content to put on Spotify. All of those are kind of options of how you create ads. Now, where you put those ads comes into the next question. There are essentially 3 kinds of media. There is what we call organic media. That would be free or nearly free. Sometimes that's called owned media. 2, there's paid media. That's advertising. That's just paid media at all times. And 3, there's publicity or earned media. It can be free, but it's you earn it. So your ads will go a variety of different places. I want to talk about organic marketing first, because realistically, a lot of artists don't necessarily have the funds that large companies have to go and do online advertising or traditional print advertising. So some of our organic marketing is one of the most beneficial ways to promote your campaign or your show or your tour or your gallery showing or your dance troupe that is free or nearly free. So of course, like, if you have a smartphone, that makes a big difference, because social media and access to internet, because social media is one of the easiest ways to do this. It's free if you have those other things, and it has a lot of reach and a lot of eyes on it. Eyes to ads is one of the more difficult things to get. And that's why in-person marketing isn't necessarily the focus of this per se, because you know how to market yourself in person. You've been talking to people your whole time that you've been doing these things. You just have less opportunity to meet people as you do opportunity for people to see your things online. The cost per reach, I guess, is just higher in person than it is online. So posting to social media is a great way, and knowing how to do that well is a good way. And that's learning the algorithm, learning SEO, that kind of thing. Telling all your friends and then asking them to tell all their friends. It's another great way. Engaging with other artists to cross promote. I think that's something I haven't seen happen as much as I would like for it to. That there could be a really good symbiotic relationship between artists and other artists promoting each other. We are living in an age where I feel like competition is there. Don't get me wrong, it's always there. But I think it's starting to get tampered down with a desire for community. And so I think being passionate about the community is one of the best ways you can bring in, we're getting a little bit of feedback here, you can bring in some goodwill between other artists and other audiences that maybe had never heard of you from them, and your audience, you're introducing them to somebody new too. Utilize community calendars, radio shout outs, that kind of thing. There's a lot of like in Regina here, and I'm sure other places, radio stations have like a what's going on in the community segment. And you can go online and apply to be a part of that, and they'll put it on the website and they'll say it on air. That's a really great way to do some free organic marketing that will have a larger reach. And the next is, if you have a website, which you can make free websites or blogs, just make sure they're SEO optimized. Blogging is still an effective way to get new eyes on your brand. So don't be afraid to pop in a Wix website, even if it has wix.com/your username, like if you don't want to pay for a domain or anything like that yet, it's a good place to start. And then you can put long form content there and link to it. But if you have it SEO friendly or SEO optimized, then you might come up in Google searches. So people type in things to do in Vancouver and you happen to have a show on that week, maybe because your website's showing that, it'll show up and they'll go, hey, this seems like a cool thing to do. That's an option. The next we're going to talk about here is paid marketing. I've put little dollar signs to tell you about how much things cost, because a lot of people maybe don't have a frame of reference, and I spend a lot of time buying advertising space. So I'll let you in on the secrets of how much things are typically. Paid social media, which, as a quick note, you'll have the option to boost your post. Don't do that. Okay, I thought it was my mic, but it's not. Don't do that. Instead, go to Meta Business Manager, Ads Manager, and create ads from there. They get better reach, they get better bid pricing, and they are optimized for algorithms in a way that's a little bit better. You're going to get more bang for your buck. Now, the best thing about online marketing for me is that you can set a budget. So it can be as little as you're going to spend $5 a day to you're going to spend $5,000 a day or more. You're really in control of the pricing of it. And social media cost per bid's typically a little less, partially because you can really target your audience. So bring back that audience targeting. You know, you want to be reaching essentially Vancouver rich moms who have kids in dance. You're probably going to then go to people who like Lululemon, follow gentle parenting sites, own a golden doodle, you know, like go a little bit in depth, and you can build that out then in an online marketing situation. That information is available for you to target people with. You're still reaching your target audience. I've always been more digitally focused. I think that's the future of marketing. I think that a lot of traditional marketing, depending on your target audience, costs a lot for a little bit of return, whereas online marketing costs a little for a lot of return. So that's kind of why I preach it a little bit more, and I've spent a lot of time in it. But you know, if your audience is maybe older, you still might want to have a good mix of traditional. If your audience is very anti-internet for whatever reason, you might want to be in traditional. So that all kind of depends. But I really think that social media advertising specifically is the way to go for most artists. Google ads, it's a little bit more pricey than social media ads. You can still set a budget, but there's a lot of competition, and so your cost per click bids can be expensive depending on what you're doing. On the upside, you can really narrow it down again, and that makes it more affordable, knowing that everybody who's clicking on your ad is getting the ad because they are in your target audience and they would be interested. Radio advertising can depend. It depends. You can get a nonprofit rate from certain radio stations. The size of the radio station will make a big difference. Many radio stations will record, like if you're not necessarily a performer, they will record for you, and you might even have the chance to work with them to write them for you. I would say for radio, it's sort of hit and miss. So if you're in a large demographic, you're in Vancouver, Toronto, it's going to be more expensive. It could be prohibitively expensive. If you're in a smaller center like Swift Current, Saskatchewan, or even Regina to a certain extent, though we're getting a little expensive here, you might be able to get it for much more affordable. So look into them. Student radio stations are something to look into too. Ask around at your universities. If that's in your target audience, see if they have ad space you can buy for relatively cheap. And that might be a way to get out there, but make sure that it's appropriate for your target audience. Billboards have increased in price. And the thing I think to remember about billboards is you've got two options. You've got physical, traditional billboards, print billboards, or you have digital billboards. Whether it's worth it will wholly depend on the location of the billboard, the format of the billboard, and your target audience. And it depends somewhat too on each company, but a lot of digital billboards seem like a good idea because you do not pay production costs. However, likely your ad will only be shown 6 seconds every minute or 10 seconds every 2 minutes. That seems good. Like, hey, my ad shows every 2 minutes, but if it's near a roadway and people are driving, likely they're driving by and never seeing your ad. And are people able to read and understand what you're trying to say in that ad in that short of amount of time? Those are questions to ask. You can make them on Canva. They can be cheap. They don't have to move. They can be just static digital billboards, but they're not always the most effective tool unless they're in your budget range. If you're going to go billboard, like if you had unlimited budget, I'd almost always say traditional over digital for this reason. Because instead of getting, 10% of the eyes driving by per minute, you're getting all the eyes that are driving by per minute, as long as they look, which you can't control. So, but there is a production cost to that. It can be prohibitively expensive. Around here, I would say it wouldn't be uncommon for the production costs. So the costs of printing it onto the paper and putting it on the billboard to be upwards of, $300 to $500. Plus, you're looking at $500 a week at some places for billboards. There are cheaper ones, but those are kind of the standard midline across the board in Regina right now. So again, you're in Vancouver, that's going to be way more expensive. You're in Lloydminster, you're in Medicine Hat, you're in smaller centers, probably a little cheaper. That's all dependent on where you're at and what your audience is. The other issue I have with radio and billboards specifically, to a certain extent, transit, is that you have no feedback. So I can go and look in my online ads and see that all these people went to my website and bought a ticket to my event. You can see what the turnaround is. You can see what the ROI or the, now I don't even know what ROI stands for. Got talking too much. The return on investment, that's what it means. You make sure that you have a valid amount of people coming in to justify that spend. You don't have that information. Radio does not provide those stats. To a certain extent, TV doesn't even provide those stats. Billboards definitely don't. They have no way to gather that information to know that what you've done has been effective. That's something that, as a marketer, I don't like. Transit ads, I have found to be very successful. They are expensive. They are a production cost of probably, if you're going to do a side of a bus, that's about $1,300 production cost plus a good amount to run it. But the cards inside buses are cheaper, and that might be an option. And you can usually get a nonprofit rate depending on what organization you're with. And sometimes they'll leave them run longer because they don't have anything to replace them. So you might get more bang for your buck that way, but it's kind of hard to do. Bus benches are really hit and miss on pricing and really hit and miss on a lot of things. And if they get vandalized, If the side of the bus gets vandalized, you have to pay to re-put that ad back up. So it's sort of hit and miss. Influencer marketing is something that I think is very interesting, and that is influencers are dependent on what you value as an influencer. So you might think somebody with 1 million followers is an influencer. That's true, probably. But the right people in your niche could have 1,000 followers and be an influencer. So that's why the price on that could be anywhere from you're paying Kim Kardashian to promote your brand, which probably nobody's doing, or you know somebody who's really active in the community you want to target, and you ask them, you know, if I give you free tickets, will you post about my production? If I give you backstage passes, would you tell your followers about my band? So it could be anywhere in that. And to be honest, just ask. I would just reach out and ask. If you're going to high level, like 10,000 followers, 20,000 followers and more, usually those people do want compensation. That's their business. But if you go to a smaller, maybe micro influencer level, you're more likely to get people who are really happy to like cross promote, or really happy to just have things to post about and to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. Online audio is the new age radio. It has a little bit better stats. It's got a little bit more going for it. This is like Spotify. As people are listening to Spotify unpaid, they hear ads. You can target them with their ads based on their interests, their location, etc. To a certain extent, so can podcasts. I've advertised on a variety of different podcasts, including the CBC podcasts. They have that ability too, to somewhat be able to target it to certain audiences based on certain interests, based on location, using some pretty cool new age tools. They're more expensive. They know that they're kind of worth it. And if we would have caught it when podcasting just kind of started becoming popular, you might have got it cheap. And maybe you can find a local podcaster that's got a good audience. They should be able to provide that to you. And you could utilize them. But for the most part, online audio is a little bit hit and miss. It operates much the same way as social media marketing does.
Jess, sorry,
yep.
Jess. There is a question in the chat there. It's from Jane. Jane, do you want to ask your question?
I was going to wait till the end.
Oh,
I can wait till the end, or I can answer it now. Totally up to you.
It's fine to wait till the end. You're in the middle of something.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so the next we have is print ads. They could be printed in the newspaper, they could be printed in a magazine, they could be printed on a playbill, they can be printed on a variety of things. They are, if you're not paying for the printing and you're only paying for the ad space, they're can be somewhat affordable. If you're paying for both, they're exorbitantly expensive. So watch yourself there. Again, smaller little community newspapers, probably cheaper. But I've seen some small community newspapers for eighth page ad or a quarter page ad charge upwards of like $500 a month. So if that's not in your budget, it might not be as worth it of taking that same $500 and doing it online, depending on your target audience and your availability. So that's kind of something to consider. Posters are the same way. And I know Regina here, we love posters. Other places, maybe not so much, but they are kind of expensive to print, and you have no idea if they stay up. You've got no idea if people came, unless they tell you, from the poster, but they do seem to have some traction here. So that sort of depends on what you want to spend. And TV is expensive. And for the most part, again, they don't actually have the stats you think TV should have. That was something that I have learned in the recent years. They have ratings, I guess, they have viewers, but you have no idea if people just left their TV on for their cat or not. And you have no idea if your ad's getting fatigued. You have no idea. So that's kind of where I sit with paid marketing. For artists, I always lean towards online. It's so much more controllable. It's so much more targeted. It gives you so much more feedback, and it's more affordable long term. But that might not be your target audience. And here's some other options for you. In your community, pricing will vary. But I know this is sort of the range of things in Regina right now. Lastly, we're going to talk about, lastly, we're going to talk about earned marketing. And we can talk about some strategies on how to get into earned marketing. Ways to market that are earned always come from an outside source in. So that's why they're not owned. News coverage is a good one, and it's actually relatively easy to get. I think a lot of people think you need a PR degree to be able to get involved with the media. You really don't. Most places would be happy to talk about something on sometime in the week leading up to what you have going on by just shooting their newsroom an email and saying, hey, I've got this going on. Do you want, I'd be happy to provide an interview. I'd be happy to provide on screen or a written statement, whatever you need. Like, do you want to talk about it? If you can come up with an angle, and this is where you do start to play a little bit of a publicist, that's even better to provide. So maybe you're doing a dance performance that's focused on environmentalism. That's an excellent way to kind of get into the media by saying, local dance artists raises the curtain on environmental issues through dance. If you can frame it in a way, you can build an angle, you're more likely to get picked up in the news. Then the next is published reviews. So back in the day when there was a lot more reviews put into newspapers, that was a good way to get earned media. Online reviews, you can ask people to review your production or whatever on their social media, that kind of thing. That would be earned media. Testimonials are very much in the same vein. So people go on and they say, I had this experience. This is what it was like. This is why I support this production or this tour or this band. That's earned media. Editorials are kind of a combination. So typically the difference between like a news story and an editorial is that you maybe have written the editorial yourself. And that's not a terrible idea. If you have the ability to write and you find yourself pretty good at it, I would say write an editorial, come up with an angle about your production or your project, and pitch that to news media, to blogs, to TV spots, and magazines, that kind of thing. Like if there's a journal or a literary collection, that kind of thing that might support that, do that. If you've already done the legwork, you're more likely to get into the media than without having done the legwork. And the last is awards and accolades, and that's kind of 50-50, right? Like if you've won a big award for your music, likely you're going to get earned media right off of that. So, apply to things. There are things that there's awards that come to you because you did a good thing, and then there's awards that come to you because you went out and looked for them. That's not a terrible way to get a certain level of brand recognition, as well as what we call social proof, which is where people believe in you more because other people believe in you and they need that confirmation. It's a whole psychological thing. But my best advice stands to be always is ask nicely when it comes to earned media. What is the worst that's going to happen by emailing the newsroom at a local news station and saying, hey, I've got this thing going on. Would you guys like to feature it? They don't answer, or they say, no, that's not what we're interested in right now. That's fine. No harm, no foul. Ask again. You can keep asking when it comes to new campaigns, and eventually somebody's going to go, that person that emails us about her art all the time, let's have her on. It's great. You don't lose anything and it costs you nothing. So earned media or earned marketing and earned media is some of my favorite ways to get out there, because it makes people feel at ease that other people have confirmed that what you're doing is good and that they will like it. So reach out, send emails, cold email people. You don't even have to cold call anymore. It's way less awkward. Worst that happens is they don't answer you. Okay, now I want to talk about, and I think this will partially answer Jane's question, but I want to talk about it more in a second, is how to optimize your online presence. So your online presence may be social media, it might be a blog, it might be your website. I will say I do still recommend everybody gets a website, personal website. If you pay for the domain, a lot of them are cheap. Make it something good though. Like, don't do a .info website unless you have to. But a lot of the times a website is a worthwhile thing to have, if only for the search engine function of it, but also to hold your long form content, maybe your resume, maybe your headshot, that kind of thing, and link back to. So making sure your content is search optimized. Even Instagram captions now are search optimized, including like not even just hashtags. Hashtags are starting to fade their way out everywhere but Twitter. And now your content is being indexed. So expressly say things in your caption that you want people to know, or people would search. And this gets back into the old school, it's not that old, idea of caption theory. Captioning, or not caption theory, hashtag theory. Hashtagging was the only way to go find like posts for a long time, and that's not true anymore. So take that same strategy of what about my content would people be interested in, and find a way to naturally work it into your caption. TikTok now, if you're on TikTok, will even index things said in video, not just in your captions of videos. So they've really taken it to the next level. I imagine Instagram will come along and try to replicate that as well. So expressly say things, talk about things, title things in a way, because you can put those title cards on in video now. Have that be something that people would search, and think to yourself, if I were looking this up and I wanted to find it on YouTube, what would I search? And add that in your caption. There's a tool called Google Search Console that, if you have a website, will show you what search terms are leading people to your website. That can give you some feedback about what people are searching for and if it's congruent with your content. So if people are searching for things that do apply to you and getting you, that's great. Probably do more of that. If people are searching for things that don't apply for you and they're not getting your website, you're probably not quite right. So that's kind of how you start to optimize your social media. One of the things that is also important about your social media is that your followers and following list will dictate where you show up in algorithms. So if you should be conscious about who you're following. And if it's a lot of like meme accounts or whatever, that's probably not going to be as helpful as if you're following people who are in your target audience. That way you'll be displayed to more people who are in your target audience. Now, if more people follow you who are in your target audience, you're going to be shown to more people who are in your target audience, which is a lot of ways to say target audience. But that's kind of the way it works in the algorithm. You're going to want to look into, depending on what platform you choose as well, to optimize your presence, is posting times and posting frequency. I would say take whatever's kind of recently been prescribed. I would say for Instagram, it's more so like once a day at max on your actual like posts. But you can go down to 2 to 3 times a week, and still that would be very good. I think Instagram's going to eventually transition to like your static photo posts you could do once a week and still maintain a level of security in the algorithm, as long as you're posting at least 3 Instagram stories a day. Which is a lot. It sounds like a lot, but there's 15 seconds. They can be quick. But 15 seconds 3 times would do fairly well. Some of them can be static. Of course, video always does better. If you're going to do Reels or TikTok, you could go once a day quite easily and be just as platformed as you were before. Facebook, you're looking to probably likely need to go down to 3 times a week. Facebook stories, maybe a little bit more. Twitter, I mean, in my opinion, you can go for it in Twitter. Especially now, there's been a lot of changes recently. Elon Musk style to Twitter, and now like you're kind of rewarded for tweeting endlessly. So as much as you want, really. Other platforms, like if you're gonna get into something like Reddit, that all depends on the engagement you're getting with it. Blogs, you're going to want to post bare minimum once a week. You're probably going to do better at twice a week. YouTube, you're going to do better at once a week bare minimum, but twice a week does a little bit better than that. You don't need to do more than that. So it all sort of depends on the platform. Then once you start doing it kind of at that prescribed rate, you're going to find out things like, oh, well, my stuff works better when I only post two times a week, as long as I post in the evenings. Or on Mondays, it works really well at 11 a.m. On Fridays, it works really well at 5 p.m. And you'll just see that in your insights and just make tweaks from there. Realistically, I want to talk to you a little bit about the content you're putting out a little bit more. Short term, up to date, behind the scenes content is king right now. So if you can think about your favorite brand, what are they posting? Probably Instagram stories or TikToks. And what are they showing? A really good example is like Scrub Daddy sponges do a really good job on TikTok. So TikTok's going to be your platform, which, to be honest, I wish I had it in me to do TikTok, because the algorithm is so unreal. Scrub Daddy's doing really well. They have hilarious videos that are appropriate for the platform, that are short, that shows their offices on the back end, as well as showcasing their product. They're crushing it. And it's one of the more successful ways to go about it. Now, think of your favorite influencer if you're going more personal branding. They likely show like their outfit of the day, and they're getting ready, and they're, show things of their dogs and what they ate that day and that kind of information. And people care about that too. If you think about your favorite Broadway production, Six is a good example, semi-recent. They all had really active social media profiles, and they showed a lot of the backstage things, and you knew things like, oh, they changed the wig, or oh, they did this, or here's all the alternates, and you knew all sorts of things about that production from behind the scenes that you didn't necessarily get before. People love it. That's the way to go. Beyond storytelling, it's the most effective way to let people into your life in a way that you can control and build some level of engagement with the people that follow you. Your online presence, whether it's your social media, which is the easiest and cheapest way to do it, or your website, just let it have a sense of reliability that you're going to be consistent on it. It doesn't have to be like, say you just don't have the spoons to do 3 posts a week and you can only do 2 posts a month. That's cool. Just make sure you're doing those 2 posts a month. Just let people know that they're not going to follow you and you're never going to post about it again. And let people know that they're not going to follow you and you're never going to post about the thing they followed you for again. Or else they're just going to not get interested. You're going to fall in their algorithm, and then they're not going to be seeing what you want them to see. So just consistently at whatever pace you choose is likely the best course of action. Algorithms will reward consistency and value way before they will reward quantity and followers. So consider that. This is also true of your website. How to get SEO optimized on your website is to make sure you're constantly adding value. That's why Instagram captions changed from hashtags, which can be easily be manipulated, to caption content. They want to make sure that people are getting what they want to see and what's helpful and valuable to them. So make sure you're providing that value to your target audience, and including search terms that they would use to look up that information. You can always do algorithm research on your own on the platform that you're looking for more guidance. They are starting to get more and more similar as time goes on. The standalones being Twitter, it's kind of its own beast, and then TikTok is kind of its own beast, but Facebook and Instagram, being owned by Meta, have very similar vibes. So you do kind of research on one, you're kind of good for a while. Lastly, I want to say is you got to tell a story. This applies to all things. So whether that's the story of how you went from not knowing your lines to opening night of a show, that's a story, and that's a story to tell. If it goes from, here's my dog and I've trained him to learn new tricks, that's still a story. It doesn't have to always be like some hero, like long form, I'm telling you a complicated story. It just has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and people have to care. And sometimes you have to tell people why they have to care, and that's fine. Lately, social media has made us a little bit lazy with a lot of things. I find, especially for short form video, a lot of people don't want to read. A lot of people don't want to research. So give people the information that they need, ideally in a video form where they can find it or quick reading, and that will already set you up to win. Everything else, tell it in a story. And no unnecessary details, but something somebody goes on a journey on that keeps them interested till the next time. Go watch, just type in story time on TikTok and you'll find some of the wildest stories told in bite-sized pieces. Take that theory and apply it to anything you're trying to tell people, and people will be more interested. People have to know why they have to care. And sometimes you just got to say, this is important because, and then tell a story about it. That is sort of the overarching content guideline. Tell people why they need to care, tell them a story, and let them see behind the scenes. Other than that, you're pretty well off to a really great start. So, you have questions. I have answers. You can feel free to put them in the chat, or you can ask them out and about. I'll probably stop sharing my screen here so that if you want to come on camera, you're brave, you're welcome to do so. The only other thing I'm going to say is you can email me if you don't feel comfortable asking questions here at jggrant@live.com or through my website at rebelyqr.com. If you have questions that you think of later or whatever and you want an answer to, I'd be happy to answer them. Other than that, I'm going to take a look at the chat finally. Thoughts on LinkedIn? Is it a good platform for creatives? Depends on your target audience. So if your target audience are people who are on LinkedIn, are professionals, are marketers, that kind of thing, then LinkedIn's a really great place to be. And if you're doing, I will say this about LinkedIn, like real talk, a lot of content on LinkedIn is very contrite. And I think if you come at LinkedIn in a really authentic way without trying to impart, like, I think multi-level marketing, not to hate on anybody, but they've been telling people for years that the way to be successful is to like leave with a lesson. The problem now is that everybody, especially on LinkedIn, is trying to preach some level of a lesson, and you don't have to, and nobody needs you to. So if there isn't like an inherent lesson, life lesson in the content, don't force it. I would say just be natural with your content, be authentic. That's what people on LinkedIn like nowadays. Do a photo. If you're going to do LinkedIn, you need to do a photo, or else they just don't really perform as well. If you're going to advertise on LinkedIn, that's a whole other beast. It's like a combination of Facebook advertising and Google ads. So a little bit of research into there. It's a somewhat complicated platform to advertise on. So that's just something to consider. But as a platform to be organic on, it's excellent if the people you're looking for are maybe of a higher tax bracket, they're corporate, or there is a community for whatever you're promoting on there already. Now, you can trailblaze, you can start to build one. That's excellent. But I would say have a secondary platform in case people just aren't on LinkedIn as much as you'd like them to be, to go to keep up with you. So whether that be Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is, if you do that thing, or if you do that, then the rest of it will sort of be easy to build content from, because there's really good reactions and stuff on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great platform if you're willing to put in the time to target and do it. It's great. The next question, how do freelancers manage their professional identity and branding if they have varying roles and responsibilities? For example, an educator, esthetician, theater enthusiast. Do you pick one? Is it possible to bring them together on a platform? I would say not only is it possible, it's preferable. You're going to have, people have a hard time managing more than one platform for each one of their things because they want to annex them. But remember above all else that people want you as much, if not more, than their service. So there are lots of theater professionals out there. There are lots of estheticians out there. There are lots of freelancers out there. And I think it's important to combine them all together, show yourself as a fully faceted person, and make you the thing that people want just as much as your services. Because there's a lot of people to pick from. Why would people pick you? Well, because they like you. So, and they're going to like you because you do all of those things. The right people are going to like you because you do all of those things. So show it off. And that gives you an incredible amount of content to work with, which is awesome. A lot of people struggle to think of content topics, but even if you're just talking about those 3 things, you're 3 content buckets into a content strategy that puts you ahead of most people that are like, well, I act, but I also knit, like that's it. So if you can put it all into one platform, I think that's better than separating it out. As long as I would say if those are all businesses, you would not be remiss if you had the ability to also have individual profiles. And then what I would do, this is like getting into strategy for you, is pick a visual identity for each one of those things and have their individual profiles like show that. And then when it is on your profile, like you as a your personal brand, it contains that same branding. So maybe you have 3 visual identities interspersed on your Instagram profile, for example, that lead to each one of those businesses. So they're easily identified, because some of the people that follow you are really going to care about your theater, but are not going to care at all about your esthetician stuff. But if you give them a visual guide, and it could be as simple as a different filter, a visual guide, they'll hone in on the things they're interested in and they will engage with it. And you've got stories content for days then. And that's awesome. And that's what people love. So they're gonna, even if they're maybe never gonna get their eyebrows waxed or whatever esthetician work is available, they still might be interested in hearing about it. So might as well just combine it all into one. It gives you a lot of content. And I think it's gonna be really effective. Are there any other questions? Because I've got 20 more minutes that we can fill with questions. And yes, you should be able to pin the interpreter if you need to, probably by pinning anybody yourself in the top comment, or like if you hover over them and the 3 dots, so just say pin. What else can I speak to while I'm here until somebody has a question? I would say my warning bells go off every time people talk about personal branding and they talk about, I guess, over curation. I do say have 3 to 5 things that you can talk about, but never feel confined to those 3 to 5 things. If your dog's going to the vet and you want to talk about it, even if you typically talk about quilting. If you decide you want to pivot what your personal brand is, do that. Your audience, if they've built up a level of investment in you, will follow you. That's the thing. I'm not saying you're starting a cult, but the thought processes behind it are the same. You want people to really care what you have to say and be invested in what you do, and then follow you wherever you go. And it sounds like a cult. It's not. Just don't get weird about it. But we want that level of interest in you at least, because then you decide you're gonna be a professional violin player, and then all of a sudden you go, you know what? I also want to act. And then you do the Miley Cyrus and you just be doing both of those things now. People will follow you. And then all of a sudden you go, you know what? I think I'm a producer now. People are like, great, awesome. That's what you want to build. And that's what a personal brand does. Instead of trying to do everything on a really professional level, there's merit to that too. But for most artists, you don't have the time to manage a professional profile and a business profile and a personal profile. So just combine them. And Keep in mind though, like don't share too much about your life. I don't want to get anybody in any safety problems, but for the most part, like people want insight into the day-to-day life you live, and a lot of people don't realize that they do. So you can build a story out of the littlest things. You started crocheting a quilt or crocheting a blanket, and it went horribly wrong in the middle, and you're telling the story. I saw somebody on the other day who had gotten like roughly 500, 600 more Instagram followers because she was posting about these bananas she had in her kitchen that would not turn yellow. I don't know why I was invested in that, but I was, because she was interesting. She told a good story. I was down. Now I follow her and she does like nail art tutorials, and like, that's great. I'm so glad to learn. But I was there for the bananas to begin with. So yeah. Real story with the blanket. Yes, it could happen like at any time. People love to see the struggle of something maybe mundane that they just don't have any relation to, or something that's a niche interest of yours. And once you do that, you can start to direct them to the things you want to direct them to, which is, hey, buy tickets to this thing I'm putting on. Hey, are you interested in booking a theater workshop? Here's how you do it. You can all tie that in. So people think that their personal brand is difficult to maintain, and with the outside of content creation, it can be, but if you make it authentic enough, it just feels like you're posting more. And the main barrier I do find people have to that is that they worry what people are going to think of them. So here's your pep talk from Jess of the day. People have the ability to tap through your Instagram stories if they don't want to see what you do. People have the ability to unfollow your Instagram account if they don't want to see what you do. And people have the ability to mute you on Facebook if they don't want to see what you do. And you don't have to take that personally. And likely they just don't support what you're doing, or they're not interested in what you're doing. Not so much they don't agree with you. So just if you can separate your presence, your brand, which is kind of like why I like calling it an online brand. That's my brand. That's not me per se, physically. You can often get away with not taking things so personally, and you don't have to. Now, the people who you think are going to judge you are very unlikely to be brave enough to actually type a hate comment under anything you post. Realistically, that girl from high school, she's going to get roasted if she posts underneath your video. If you do get hate comments, just remember, you don't know those people. You don't know, they're not people you know, because the people you know would be scared to post that. So realistically, what people think of you does not have to be your business. Be brave. Be brave, post, do it anyway. You're likely to see more return than you are going to have any risk. As long as you're not posting your home address, you know. All right. Any other questions?
Jess, I just had a question, and that was at one of the slides you'd mentioned websites that were SEO friendly. What's SEO?
Oh, sorry. I should have defined that in my definitions. SEO stands for search engine optimization. So, I see Gabby has a question. I'll come back to hers in one moment. So SEO is a digital term for things that are indexed by Google typically. I mean, by Bing too, but realistically, we're all using Google. So it's your content. It's the way your heading tags, this gets a little complicated, on your website, your heading tags, if there's terms that are searched in those H tags, that is a search engine optimization. So if you post a blog that says 10 things to do if you have a Lego stuck up your nose, people searching Lego stuck up nose are going to then come with that to that result. But if you post a terrible thing has happened to your nasal cavity, here's what to do, that's not going to be search content. So SEO, now you put alt text behind your photos for a variety of reasons, but one of them is that helps Google identify what is in your photos. And in your content, you want to sprinkle in search terms. For instance, people are going to say nose instead of nasal cavity. So you're going to say nose instead of nasal cavity. You may know, because you've looked in Search Console, that people are also searching nose blockage. blockage instead of stuck up nose. So you'd sprinkle that in so that you're getting what people are searching for is in your content. That's the easiest way to SEO or search engine optimize. There's a lot more technical things that you can do in the back end of a website that if you have the tech ability and skills to do, you can. That comes all down to like what favicon you choose, which is the little icon that shows up in the tab. It's called the favicon. That all the way down to how your 301s redirect would be still under the search engine optimization umbrella. But those are getting real technical that I feel like a lot of people are not at that point, probably get a developer involved. But the best you can do for your content is know what people are searching for and use that in your content in plain language instead of maybe other ways to say it.
Okay. And, Gabriel Dufresne had a question too. Gabriel, do you want to ask that?
She does, and I do see it. Oh,
Okay.
There you go, Gabby.
Sure, I'll pop on. It's just like pertaining to like choosing your names and stuff mostly on socials, I guess, mostly Instagram. I don't worry about TikTok, but how branded do you need to be? Do you want your artist name? Do you want, if you work with your stage name, do you want something like super artistic-y? Mostly asking because I've been with a name that doesn't necessarily pertain to like my personal Gabrielle name. Just wondering about that.
It sort of depends. So the way, like if we're talking about Instagram specifically, you have a handle,
right?
And then you have name field. And in Instagram, your name field is higher ranked in search than your handle, which means your handle means a little bit less. However, the downside of that is that you can only have one handle, like nobody else can have that handle, but you could have more than one person with your name. So the one specific, one's general, one's more searched than the other. When it comes to your name, I usually recommend, like, if you can, so if you have the space, put your name in the name field, and you can also then put, you know, like for me, if I were to do it today, I could do Jess Grant marketing specialist, because that is the most indexed of all of the content on your Instagram is that name field. So you can leave it with your name as long, or like you can leave your handle something else as long as you have your name there. But if more than one people have your name, you have like a long list and you got to kind of go through and hope for the best. That's the benefit of maybe having a handle that's more reflective of what people would maybe look for. So if it's close to your name, that'll usually be fine. If it's close to something you do, that's usually okay. If it's something completely kind of random that you chose when you're 16, which is the case for most people, you have to decide then, have you already built a certain amount of understanding that is your handle? Is it on things? Is that how you think people think of you? I know there was a guy in Regina who is a personal trainer, and his handle for the longest time was EvoFit, even though his name was Dylan. And people would just refer to him as Evo all the time. So it depends on what you're like known for. So that's kind of a personal decision. And then maybe ask around, like, when you see my handle, like, do you think of that when it comes to my Instagram, or could you tell me what it is off the top of your head right now? And if they can't, maybe switch it to something closer to your name. That's kind of where it's at. Yeah, no problem. But the name being indexed thing is something to remember. That name field, you can always put in a search term in there as long as it's natural. And I would, if you are putting in emojis in your name field, I would put emojis at the end instead of at the beginning. There does make a slight difference on where it shows up when people search in Instagram for something. This is a side note. Same with your captions. If you put your emojis throughout, but not the very first thing, you're usually better off. The very first thing needs to be a word of some variety. Any other questions from anybody? I've got 9 more minutes. And you can always email me, by the way. That's JG Grant, first initial, middle initial, last name, @live.com, or through my website, rebelyqr.com. which needs work. So do as I say, not as I do when it comes to the website SEO. All right, if there's no more questions, then I just want to say a big thank you to OnQ for having me and for Brad for having me on. And an even bigger thank you for the interpreters that kept up with what I'm sure was probably too fast, and I'm very sorry. And thank you guys all for coming out and for joining this webinar. It's better than talking to the ether, and I really appreciate your guys' questions. And again, have no fear in emailing me. I'll be happy to answer anything you have. If you want to send me a link to your social media and go, how do you think this is? I'd be happy to give you that feedback too. So let me know. You can find me around OnQ events as I'm a senior partner for Riser, so I'll be there quite a bit for that. And other than that, it's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
And I just want to say thanks to Jess and also to Barb and Brandy for their interpretation, which was great this afternoon, and also to Canadian Heritage for their funding. And Jess, if you look at the chat, there's lots of gratitude in there. So, you know, it's worthwhile taking a look at that. So just thank you for everybody who's joined us today, and take care. And the next one is December 3rd, and it's about finance and you know, keeping your finances straight, especially if you are self-producing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.